Hello and welcome to another episode of Google Pay Live Integrations. My name is Domi and I'm a DevRel for Google Pay. Actually, today's episode will be a little bit special because it's the first time we are doing it against the web. So we will use Adyen's Web SDK to do a Google Pay integration. I will tell you all about it in a second, but before that, let me introduce you to my guests. First of all, there's Jose, as always. Hi, Jose, how are you?
Hello, Domi. How's it going? Good to see you again.
Cool. And second, we have, and I'm very pleased, we have Guilherme with us. Guilherme is a front-end engineer from Adyen. Hey, Guilherme, how's it going?
Hey, Dominik. Yeah, man, I'm good. Thanks for having me here today. It's a pleasure.
Nice. Cool. Guilherme, let me start with one question. So what is a day-to-day task you have at Adyen in a week?
Yeah, we gather together. We usually are always like refining new payment methods. We are also taking care of checking our GitHub repositories, which we have our SDKs there. So we check what the community is bringing to us, checking issues and stuff like that. And also, yeah, always refining new payment methods and see the trends of what's coming.
Yeah, and so you have at Adyen you have different teams doing the Android integration and the web integration, right? And you work for the web team. Is that correct?
That's correct. Every SDK, we have different SDKs. So we have the web, Android, iOS, cross-platform, which is Flutter, React Native, and yeah, we have separate teams for each of them.
Cool. Sounds good. I'm really looking forward to play around with the web SDK with you today.
Super cool.
All right, Jose, if you could switch over to my screen so I can give the audience a quick overview on what we are trying to achieve. Thank you so much. All right. So if you go to the Google Pay developer documentation for web, what you see if you would integrate Google Pay directly without a gateway is that you can go to the tutorial. And then if you would scroll down, one of the first steps is that you have to select your payment gateway. And in this example, you can see the gateway value is example. But for this stream, since we have Guilherme with us, we are going to use Adyen as the payment service provider. And if you scroll further down, we obviously support a lot of gateways, but you can search for Adyen here. And then you can see that the gateway value for Adyen is you need Adyen as the name and the gateway merchant ID to set up your integration. Now, since we are not going to use a direct integration like you as a developer using our pay.js integration directly, we will leverage Adyen's Web SDK. And for that, and before I hand over to Guilherme, I will very briefly show you what Adyen offers in terms of the Web SDK. So if you fire up the Adyen docs for the Google Pay integration, what you will see is, I need to scroll down a bit, they offer different kinds of integration. For the web, what they have, and again, Guilherme will tell you more about in a second, is a so-called drop-in integration and a web component. And from a technical perspective, for both integration paths, what you need on the server side is to make a call to Adyen's Session API or Adyen's Payments API. And in order to do that, you need API credentials. And within Adyen's dashboard, you find those credentials under API credentials. And then if you scroll down, you can find your settings you need to make backend calls against Adyen listed here. What you also need if it comes to web integration is that you need to whitelist your domains. So as you can see, for this integration we are using today, we obviously had to whitelist localhost in a couple of ports and some other test domains. But to not get confused too much, this was just the technical part on what you need to make server-to-server API calls against the Adyen APIs. Guilherme will now walk you through an example from the front end to the back end, where you will see that he actually will use those credentials listed here.
One question, Domi. You said that there were multiple integration paths, multiple possibilities when you're looking at the Adyen documentation. Is that accurate?
Say it again.
You were saying that there were like multiple integration paths when you were looking. So one question that I have is when or how would you choose which one to go?
Yeah, I will pass this on to Guilherme, but from my perspective, it's if you want to go a more easier kind of integration, you go with a drop-in integration. We will see how the UI looks like in a second. And if you have a more sophisticated kind of checkout process where, for example, you need a Google Pay button below a specific product for fast checkout, you could opt in for the web component. Just briefly, a drop-in integration on the Adyen side looks like this. So unfortunately, I have to zoom out a bit. Yeah.
Great.
This is
do you agree with that, Guilherme?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Will you agree with what Domi said, or will you add something on top of it?
I agree. Like we have the drop integration that, as we see here, we render multiple payment methods in a list format, and the components integration is when we want a more flexible integration. So let's say you want to place an express button in the product page, or you want to mix and match our payment methods with different PSPs. So that's when we recommend to go with components integration.
Awesome.
Sounds good. All right.
Yes.
I'm switching over.
Please.
All right. All yours.
Thanks, guys. So yeah, let's start. First of all, I'm going to show today integration using our client-side library. In this case, is the Adyen Web SDK. It's an open source available on GitHub. So yeah, feel free to take a look. And when talking with integrating with Adyen, as we mentioned, we have the drop-in and components. But also on the backend side, we also need to take into account that we need to implement there are two different types of implementation. We have the sessions flow implementation and the advanced flow implementation. They're a bit different, and depending on your use case, you need to choose the one that you would like to have. Advanced flow, I would say that's more when you are implementing advanced use cases in such as payment flow, where you want a two-step payment flow, where you want like a review page before processing the payment, or if you want to have like an express payment methods. So that's when we recommend the advanced flow.
So this is, for example, if you want to implement a flow where after the actual checkout process, a merchant, for example, wants to confirm the payment again, right? Then this advanced flow has the possibilities to make this possible.
Exactly. The merchant has more control over when the authorization will be done, when the final payment part will be done. So that's a good fit for that use case. And for simple use cases, like you just want your payment form and process the payment, we always recommend the sessions flow because it's way simpler to implement, since you just need to implement a single endpoint to communicate with Adyen in order to process payments. Whereas in the advanced flow, you need to implement 3 different endpoints.
Yes.
So for today, we are gonna start implementing the sessions flow, let's jump into it.
Great. Looking forward.
Where are we gonna build, by the way? Is it gonna be like an ice cream shop or T-shirt or electronics? Tell us about it.
Yeah. So today we're gonna be buying a Google Nest mini white Google pack for $100.
I like the order reference number. Especially the suffix.
Yes.
Great choice.
Exactly. And then we have here, that's our shop of today. We are going to be focusing everything here, just to clarify, it's hard-coded, nothing here is dynamic. And we are going to focus on the left part here, where we see the payment options. that's where we are going to render our UI components. So we are going to be focusing on the drop-in implementation and on the components implementation.
Great. And who's paying for all this? Or are we going to run in test for now?
Good question. Now we're going to run in test. And yeah, I'm going to use the account that Dominik created in the Adyen back office.
Yes. That's what I showed before, where as a developer, you can get your API credentials. That was the Adyen customer area.
Cool. Exactly. So let's jump into it. So for today, yeah, we have this project here. So basically, we just created a very simple project using Vite. And we are going to use vanilla JavaScript. We're not going to use any framework like React, Angular, Vue.js. We want to keep it simple and straightforward. And yeah, in my current setup here, we have a front-end app running, as you guys saw before. And I have a server here as well, which is the server that's going to be communicating with Adyen to create the payment session. And yeah, we're going to take a look at them step by step.
Guilherme, just 1 second. I have to give, it seems like I have to give Vakif a little explanation. So what we are trying to build today, Vakif, is Google Pay integration one-to-one with a payment service provider, Adyen. So at the end result of the video should be that you see a web shop where you can pay with Google Pay and do an actual transaction behind the scene.
Right, good, Domi. I was about to write all that in text, so thank you for that.
Sure. Go on, Guilherme.
Nice. So let's jump into it. So that's where we are going to be coding our checkout today. It's just we're going to implement everything here in this function. And yeah, let's start. So as I mentioned before, before integrating with the client-side library, we need to create a payment session. To create a payment session, let's do that. We're going to be creating a session, and this session is a asynchronous call. And yeah, this code I already have implemented is just, I'm going to open it. It's just a function that will make API call to my backend that I have running locally. And yeah, I'm just getting the payload and making a post request to my local backend. So let's do it. The create session, I'm going to pass it 2 parameters, but that varies of the implementation. Right now, here I'm passing country code, and I have it hard-coded for my current setup, which is US. And shopper locale as well. I also have it hard-coded here. Okay, so here we are going to make an API call, as I mentioned. And I'm just going to quickly go over the backend that we have in our current setup. So if I go here to the server folder, I have a simple Express server. We are using for this, the Adyen API library is also another JavaScript library focused on Node.js. And yeah, we're going to be using this library to create the payment section. So,
and by the way, Guilherme, the beauty about this is when we did a last stream with Adyen, where the integration was on Android, we actually used the same backend code as you're showing here right now. So obviously, in the backend for both the web and Android, you can reuse the code.
Exactly, you can use the same code for all different SDKs.
Yes.
So here, nothing special. I'm just yeah, I have an endpoint which I'm gonna get when the request gets here, the payment session. I'm gonna create the payload to send to Adyen to create the payment session. So I'm passing some required properties like the merchant account, which is the account that Dominik configured, shopper locale, country code, and other properties along with the amount. And then we are leveraging the Adyen library to make this session creation here. And then we return that payload to the front end. So very straightforward, and we just need to implement a single endpoint to start accepting payments.
I have a question, Guilherme.
Yes.
What's the scope of a session? What is the session useful for? Only for this context in which we are doing a simple payment, or you can use it for other means as well? What's the value of it?
Yeah, that's only for the context of this payment. So it's a payment session. So before you actually interacting with the client library, you need to create this payment session with Adyen, saying the country code that you're gonna use for this payment, and also the amount. So that's gonna be used only for the payment part here, only for that specific session, nothing else.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
So I also have a follow-up question, or maybe you can tell me if I understand this correctly. So on the backend, you create a secure server-to-server call to initialize the session per payment or per transaction, and this call then returns some kind of data, which you will then use to initialize your Web SDK, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Great.
Thank you. And just as you saw, this is a live session. So just as Domi and I did, we were asking questions directly to Guilherme because we don't have a lot of chances to talk to him. And you have the same ability. You have a live chat. So remember that we'll be taking your questions and we'll help you. We'll try our best to answer them. So don't miss that opportunity. Sorry, Guilherme, you can go.
Super cool. Let's go. Okay, so let's focus now on the integration part. So I created a payment session. So now that I have a session, I'm going to start integrating with the Adyen client-side library. For that, I'm going to install the SDK.
I think you had a typo in Adyen.
Thanks, Domi.
No problem.
Oh, pair programming.
Nice. So now we have it available here as part of the dependencies. So let's import here. So for that, first start accepting payments here, we need to first import the Adyen checkout. And we are going to start with the drop-in. So I'm going to already import the drop-in here. And we also need to import the styles for our UI components. So I'm just going to import it directly here as well. So, okay, we imported our dependencies. And now we are going to start creating our components. So first, we need to create the core, which we call the checkout. So Adyen checkout, and then we need to pass certain parameters for it. Here, we are going to pass the session that we just created. So we are going to pass the ID, which is the session ID, and session data. Session data. And right now we're just passing the payment session that we created, but we also need to pass another properties in this case, and we're going to pass the locale, the environment that we're going to use. So for now, we are doing using a test environment, and also the client key. The client key is available in the back office, and I am loading it as a environment variable.
Very good.
So I'll typically be on a backend, on the list of backend secrets, right, that you will have in your servers or in your whatever you're putting your services.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, it's actually the key I showed at the beginning. Sorry, go on, Jose.
Yes.
Needs to be treated as a secret, so cannot be exposed, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And yeah, we're going to add some events here, so we get notified when certain events are triggered in the library. So we want to know when a payment is completed. Payment completed. We would like also to know in case a payment fails. And I'm going to add here an on-error callback, which in case of some critical error happens, for example, I'm misusing a property or a configuration is wrong, then I can get notified.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have now our basic checkout object, and we are going to be using it to create our UI elements now. So let's start with the drop-in for now. So let's create a drop-in, new drop-in, and then I'm going to pass the checkout to it. And that's our UI element. Now I need to tell where I want to render this element. So I'm going to do drop-in.mount. And here I need to pass the HTML markup that I would like to mount it. So if I look in my HTML, I have this div here where I want to mount my component. I'm going to use the ID here, Adyen checkout. And I'm going to tell drop-in to mount right here. Okay. I think we are good to go.
Nice, looks good.
Let's see. So let's start. Okay, so as we can see, the drop-in was mounted in the UI. And yeah, we communicated with the Adyen back endpoint. We requested the payment information that was stored in a Dominik account, and it was returned cards, I think, right, Dominik? Which payment methods did you configure there?
That's a good question. I don't know from the top of my head, but for sure, Google Pay.
Yeah, Google Pay is here, so it was returned. So drop-in will render in the order that is returned by the endpoint, the payment methods. So we have here the Google Pay was one of the configured ones, and the drop-in, as you guys saw, like the drop-in handles the whole component, a Google Pay rendering process for us, which is great. And a cool thing here is that the Google Pay already detected that I have a card in my wallet, and I already pre-selected it here. So I can just click on it. Right now, I'm using a test user, so I have multiple cards here. I'm gonna go check out with my Visa, and then payment successful. It's good to mention that. Nice. It's good to mention that.
Let me verify on audience customer area if I can see the payment now.
Hello?
You want me to switch to your screen? Is it safe to show them? Okay. In the meantime, I'll take a question from Muhtariq Ali. Hopefully, I'm saying your name properly. Where they ask, does Google Pay have a Firebase extension? There is a public repository in GitHub that is not at the moment actively maintained that contains an extension. I don't know many details about it. What I know is that you can check that out and use it as reference. I do know that back in the day, we had an extension available that you could just simply fetch or use from the directory in Firebase. I'm not sure if that's the case anymore. But in any case, you have the code, it's publicly available, so you can take what you need from there. I hope that answers multi-tatically.
Thank you, Jose. So can you quickly switch to my screen now? Great. So you can see the payment Guilherme just did went through. I can look it up in Adyen's customer dashboard. And if I click on it, we can see the hard-coded $100 amount. And we can also see that was a Google Pay transaction performed with the test card Guilherme showed. So yeah, this worked nicely. Back to you, Guilherme.
Super cool. Yeah, let's follow up a bit more on the DropInte integration. I would like to show that you can also perform such a customization here to improve the visibility of the Google Pay component, the DropInte.
Yeah, so I guess it would be super nice if the Google Pay button can be rendered at the top, right?
Yeah, I would. I definitely agree. So for that, we have a configuration that can be passed to the DropInte, which we call instant payment types. And then we can pass here Google Pay. So as soon as I do that, when the DropInte is rendered, it will render Google Pay on top, and all the remaining payment methods will be listed at the bottom. And that is super cool because me as a shopper, I can just land in the checkout form, and then I just see the button with my card selected. I can just, click on it and pay.
Awesome. That's great. That's so great. Super
Stuff.
simple.
I really like the succeed animation that you have in the DropInte. It looks very slick. I have a question on that, on styling, Guilherme. Do you have any advice, or are there any constraints on that div layer or any layer that you have on your HTML in terms of styling? Do you have any requirement? Like, for example, let's say it has like a forced set of dimensions, and probably there are issues with displaying the content if that's the case. Do you have any advice on
that? Good question. Well, we are always trying to use our best guidelines that we recommend. We always recommend to follow the guidelines that we have. But then it's up to the merchant that is integrating to customize, right? So I might have a different background color, different border radius in my web app. And then everything is possible to do here. So we don't have guidelines per se, but that's mainly up to the merchant that's integrating to adapt the library to their guidelines. Yeah,
so the guideline is test how your checkout form looks like, right? Like do your testing and make sure it looks okay.
Exactly. And talking about customization, I think it's quite nice to show that it's also possible to leverage the Google Pay API SDK to customize the button. So we can change certain things in the button. For example, if I can go to the DropInte here, and I can say that for my payment methods configuration, for the Google Pay component, I would like to change the button radius to 20 pixels and the button color to white. So by doing that, we see that we leverage the Google Pay SDK, and it just works out of the box. And all these properties are available in our documentation page. So just feel free to check it out.
Great, thank you so much, Guilherme. This is really awesome. Jose, let's switch over to some questions.
All right. Let's go with, this is a tricky one. To be fair, it's outside of the scope of this live session. We are talking about the globally available Google Pay online API. So UPI would be out of scope in that sense. I don't know if you know, Guilherme, about this one, but if you do know, we can maybe take the opportunity to answer Sweetie's, Nihith, and Jonathan's question. They both have the same question.
Adyen supports multiple payment methods, and we also support a UPI payment method. And we have its own payment method component that we can integrate with. So yeah, just check out our docs and yeah, try it out.
Oh, yeah, actually, Jonathan was saying that it supports UPI. So apparently that was known knowledge. Thank you for confirming that, Guilherme. We have a question about country coverage. Francis Mumbai is asking which countries are covered. Now I can talk for the Google Pay ones, and as I was just mentioning, the Google Pay API, the online Google Pay API for Android and web, it's available globally. You need a payment processor that is enabled with Google Pay to operate. So in this case, we're talking about Adyen. It will be available anywhere where Adyen is available, right? And I'm sure you can talk more about that, Guilherme, the countries where you're available. But I think it's a good number of them.
Yeah, it's a good number. I don't have the number here, but yeah, multiple countries.
Great. So check out the docs. Last time I checked it out, it was just there. So take a look at that. And Adyen works with Google Pay. So in all those countries, you'll be able to use Google Pay with Adyen on the web and Android. Thank you for the question, Tim. Oh, Francis Mumbai, sorry. There's a very similar question. That's why I messed it up from Tim Manning, and it's about languages supported. In fact, in this one, I'm a bit unsure. And I know this. We have also two parts. We have the Google Pay part. We have the Adyen bit. The Google Pay bit, I believe it's not something that can be chosen. On the load payment data request, you can select the country code, but I don't think you can select the language. I think it's predetermined, right, Domi?
Yeah, it's localized based on your browser settings.
All right. And do you know about Adyen, Guilherme?
Yeah, on the client side, we support a set of languages that can be verified in our documentation. But I can tell that I believe it's more than 15 different languages. I don't have the number here right now, but yeah, that can be checked on the docs.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tim, for the question. Hopefully that was useful. One last one before we continue, maybe? Yes. We have a question from Hannah on whether you can add different Google display items in Adyen. So that's available on the Google Pay API. Not entirely sure if the drop-in component supports it. Do you know, Guilherme?
When you refer to item types, what do you mean exactly?
Yeah, I think it's unclear. We have multiple ones. Maybe let's talk about all of them. Like one would be like when you have a breakdown of prices. So that would be one type of display item. Maybe Hannah, you can clarify. The other one would be like having different line items in which like you have on one of those, you have information about the price on the product. And then on a different row, you have information about, for example, shipping.
Talking about the Adyen capabilities, we don't display the line items in the drop-in. We always display the final amount. So displaying the line items would be up to the merchant to implement. As we are doing here on the right side, we are displaying our single line item, the Google Nest, but that's up to the merchant to provide. So we always display just the final amount. And in terms of the Google, I'm not sure. Maybe you guys can, yeah.
So I guess Hannah's question is about, is it possible to configure shipping options like line items through the Adyen Web SDK so that those line items then will show up in the Google Pay payment sheet? Do you support that, or is this not something you support at the moment?
We do support that. Yeah, it's possible to pass line items. Yeah.
Is it something they can find in the documentation? Maybe.
Yes.
Do you know that?
There.
Okay.
I expect to be there. Yes.
Great.
Awesome.
I feel sorry, Guilherme. Every time we have a question, it's right on top of your video.
No worries.
So, apologies for that. No worries. And we have, by the way, an answer. Jonathan, thank you for taking a look at that. So we have 30 languages supported by the Adyen Web Library, which is, yeah, decent number.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
All right. For the sake of time, Guilherme, do you want to maybe show the documentation to show the audience what other integration possibilities are possible, or what's in your mind?
I think we can quickly jump into a component integration. Should be very straightforward.
Sure.
Because right now we just show the drop-in, right? And then we can just go over a standalone component.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Okay, let's do it. So for now, let's just comment out what we did, and let's focus on creating a standalone Google Pay component. I'm going to use the same skeleton, the same code that I used before. So the payment session being created and the instance of the checkout here. I'm going to reuse the same objects. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a Google Pay component, and I'm going to import the Google Pay from the Adyen library. And I'm going to tell my component to be rendered on the same place as we rendered our drop-in.
So basically the only difference is swapping out the drop-in object with the Google Pay object, right?
Exactly.
Yes, okay. That's nice.
And yeah, here we go. We just displayed a standalone Google Pay component. There is no, as you see, there is no like wrappers around, any styling. It's just the component itself. And that gives more flexibility to the merchant to adapt and place anywhere in the UI, as according to the merchant's design. And this component accepts the same capabilities as we showed us in the drop-in. We can pass configurations here. So let's just change the button color to white. And it gets updated. So we show today drop-in integration and components integration. I hope it's clear.
Awesome. Great. Any more questions to Guilherme and the components and drop-in integrations done with Adyen's Web SDK?
Yeah, there's one about PHP.
All right.
I miss PHP. It's been a while. So Jobak asks whether they can integrate into their PHP application. So I guess they refer client side. We do have, you can have a PHP backend, and I assume that would be possible. But I'll let Guilherme talk to that. But I think they're referring to a client application. So from our end, that wouldn't be possible as far as I know.
Yeah, and I believe Adyen has PHP, has even PHP SDKs, right, on the server side. Do you know that?
Yeah, I cannot. I think yes, but I cannot fully confirm that because I always use the Node library. But I believe so.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about backend, maybe. If you're talking about client side, then not possible. Thank you for the question.
So this is actually a very good point, Nikhil. Thank you so much. So what we did today was, and by the way, you can find the link to the GitHub repository with the source code in the video description. So what Guilherme did today was he used Adyen's Web SDK to, in the first step, make sure to create a drop-in component, and in the second step to use a standalone component to show a payment process. And if you browse the source code, if you again check the video description and go to the GitHub repository, you will see what he did at the beginning was to call Adyen's backend API to create a payment session, and this payment session then gets passed down to initialize Adyen's Web SDKs, then being responsible for rendering the drop-in component. Cool. I think that's a wrap. Thanks so much for watching this live stream. Please make sure to follow us, give us a follow on X, or if you have more questions, jump into our Discord channel. All the links you can find in the video description. Thanks for watching, and until next time.
Thanks, guys.